Good day and welcome back to another episode of the Truck Focus podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hannaberry. In today's episode, I'm excited to have a conversation with Amit, one of the co-founders of EnviroApps and a true advocate for innovation and advancement in the transportation industry. Amit's journey is super inspiring, and his perseverance to help solve major problems that carriers experience shows you just what can be accomplished when your why is strong enough and you put forth the necessary effort to do so. EnviroApps provides a proven digital solution called Easy to Track, using a cloud-based centralized database, which helps carriers and industry manage transportation of dangerous goods and waste documentation, while ensuring compliance, lowering costs, and enabling ESG gathering effortlessly. I encourage you to connect with Amit and to learn more about EnviroApps simply by visiting www.enviroapps.ca, or you can search EnviroApps on all major social media platforms. I'll make sure to include all of the contact details in the show notes below to make sure that it's a really simple process to get in touch with Amit and EnviroApps. I believe that today's episode is going to be super beneficial to carriers, drivers, and industry considering going paperless with their bill of ladings, truck tickets, and dangerous good paperwork, but are not sure where to start. I believe EnviroApps provides an excellent solution for our industry to continue to advance by removing paperwork wherever and whenever possible while remaining compliant. Well, let's get to it. Good day, Amit. Welcome to the Truck Focus podcast. How are you?
Good. Happy to be here, Josh, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited for today's episode. Just in our prior conversations, you've really touched on things that I care deeply about. So yeah, I'm excited to learn more about who is Amit, EnviroApps, and I'm excited. So why don't you start us off just kind of highlighting who is Amit?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm environmental professional. I'm very passionate about the cause for reducing our footprint on our planet, and I follow that in my personal life too. We recently built a house that is almost 75% less emissions compared to a typical Alberta home. So that's one of my passions, and I'm all about making lives easier, and that's why we are here to talk about EnviroApps.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope we can talk about the house journey too, because it blew me away because we just went through a build and I'm like, yeah, I didn't think about half of what you mentioned. So I hope we can go through that too. So to start us off too, why don't you kind of highlight just how have you been interacting with the transportation sector?
Right. So it all started, I would say, March of 2020. And that's almost the same time when COVID hit. I was looking at advancing our offering on the waste manifesting side, the digital solution that we already had. And we saw this opportunity with Transport Canada's regulatory sandbox project to actually do something similar what we have been doing on the waste manifesting side, simplifying the paperwork and automating it as much as possible. And so we talked to Tourmaline, which is one of our long-standing client, and then they were convinced to go into this project, and we were looking for a very ahead of their time kind of partner in the transportation industry. And we interacted with Trimac. That was my first interaction with the transportation industry. And Trimac is ahead of the technology curve. We knew they had tablets in all their trucks, so that made a perfect match as a partner. So we put together this industry collaborative group, totally informal, to go onto this project. And we worked with Transport Canada to actually, you won't believe, in 40 years of the TDG Act, Transportation of Dangerous Goods Act, last September, we created the first electronic TDG shipping document.
Wow.
Sometimes I think, well, why am I the first person doing this? This should have been done before. The technology has been there for 10 years, but that it is what it is.
Incredible.
At least we are moving in the right direction.
Yes, absolutely. So for the last, I guess, 18 months or so, your journey has been pretty positive then?
Yeah, absolutely. Like working with Trimac was super positive. They were quite excited at getting rid of the paperwork, and although it is still at a small scale, but that was a big barrier to overcome. There were obviously, I mean, the truckers and the carriers. They were quite excited about it, but some had their questions, right? Would this work? How would an emergency responder get the information? How would a transportation inspector react to this? Would they still ask for paper? All those natural questions came up, and we handled one by one, and it's been working great. I see, I have a view to the system, so I see that the trucks are taking these loads of shipments from one place to another, dangerous goods, condensate, crude oil, what may be, and it's working well, no issues.
Awesome. Yeah, I like hearing the positive side of our industry because I think there's enough negative publicity out there. So when people are leading change, we talked about 40 years to why me.
Yeah.
I think it's a good testament of who you are and your team, as well as the fact that there are industry leaders out there itching for improvements. And yeah, it's funny. I was writing an article just recently on the cost of paperwork, and from more so from a smaller carrier perspective, because I think that's where there's a lot of fear. Change is scary, driver management is scary, change management is scary, and just kind of highlighting, okay, well, what does that bill of lading actually cost you? So anyway, yeah, I think that's neat. So before we dive too much into that side of EnviroApps and your journey, why don't you kind of walk us through your story up to a point where you decided, you know what, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to build systems and processes and kind of go from there. So up to that point, why don't you kind of highlight that part of you?
For sure. I never thought of becoming an entrepreneur until I ran into this problem with waste manifesting. So I was managing the environmental regulatory compliance for a large infrastructure company which had pipelines, power plants all over North America, as well as gas processing in Alberta. And that's where we had great systems put in place and everything worked well, except we ran into, whenever we did the audits on compliance, we always found issues on the waste manifesting side. And there's a bit of a challenge with this particular workflow because it touches three different places. It starts with the generator of the waste generating it, and then it is passed on to the carrier, and then it goes to the disposal receiver company, and then it comes back, and that's the full cradle to grave management that needs to happen and tracked to completion with all the rules followed. Now that becomes complicated when you have three parties moving paper, and each one has their responsibility. One drops the ball or the paper goes missing, and it does. So we kind of tried looking at training, doing all sorts of things that we could do with the paper copies, but it just wouldn't work. And so at the same time, I ran into my high school classmate. I met him after 25 years. He had been in Calgary for some time, but then we finally got together and we were just chatting about this problem. And he's a IT guru. He used to work for GE, and he's done some very remarkable work, the first intranet and the e-commerce, all that. So he said, well, why don't we solve this problem and see where it goes? So that's how I became an entrepreneur by chance, and started the solution. And then we were lucky enough to, or the first customer is the toughest one to get, hard to convince.
Yes.
We were able to do that, and we have been on that growth journey since then. And then last September is when we got into the transportation of dangerous goods documents, because it's the same kind of process. It goes from the shipper to the carrier to the receiver.
Right. Yeah. That's an amazing journey, and that's a good linkage just with your friend too, because I think sometimes, well, I can't remember the book that I'm reading right now. I drew a blank, but once you talked about that, it really identified part of the CEO. It's about being a CEO, and yeah, it was kind of highlighting basically the natural formation of co-founder, and sometimes it's just two friends randomly connect, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, I have this problem. Hey, I have this, and yeah, so it's nice to see that happen organically. Obviously,
And
yeah,
then there's immense trust
yes,
already built up, right? So you don't have to worry about. And the other unique thing is, the skill set I bring in terms of the business side and owning the problem and how to solve it. And he brings the software side. It's a perfect match. Very few software companies would have the same level of understanding of the problem, right? So it's a perfect match that way.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So again, when we're talking carriers, we're talking waste, TDG. We'll also bring up general bill of ladings. Do you find, regardless of size, most carriers are faced with similar challenges on tracking, auditing, filing, making sure it's filled out properly, all that good stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, we offer like mainly the transportation of dangerous goods, documents, and waste manifest, but we also do bill of lading and truck tickets. So the other thing I'm finding with the transportation of dangerous goods documents is companies would have multiple parallel processes, like they'll have a bill of lading and a TDG document. It doesn't make any sense to do it that way. So what we are working with our clients to do is streamline their business process. And one of our clients that we are working for currently, they say, besides everything else, communication has significantly improved because now they get alerts as to when the truck moves from the place it loads, when it ends its journey to the destination. All those earlier they would have to call or find out. All that is eliminated. All the paperwork is eliminated. They don't have to print anything. You believe it or not, they were actually waiting almost 8 minutes to print on a dot matrix printer. I mean, in this day and age, it's just not required, right?
Yes.
You have way better things that you can spend your 8 minutes with.
Yeah, it's shocking, especially if you think of the cost of an 8 minutes, especially if a truck is idling while waiting and there just happens to be the bathroom and there happens to be a coffee machine and 8 minutes turns into 25 minutes every time. That's pretty outrageous for sure. That's common practice. Like that is a common thing that I think is just an oversight that it's nice to see. There's
The other,
attention on it.
yeah, the other thing is, the carriers have a lot of paperwork to do. Truck drivers themselves, they have to fill out a lot of paperwork, and it is increasing. I mean, I'm not saying it's not required. I mean, they are put in for a good reason. Things like electronic logging devices that is also currently being pursued by Transport Canada, right? It's a new requirement. All those things will improve safety, but then it also increases the workload for drivers. And that's where, people like us come in. We are thinking about how can we make that life easier for the truck driver, make it easy for him to do the documentation and automate it as much as possible. And even, as the next step, integrate with other software so they don't have to deal with like same data to be entered twice. That's the whole aim. Like that's what we are going to do right now. We are implementing for a client which then wants to connect to or integrate with SAP. That way, the data gets passed on to our system from SAP, and all the driver has to do is now change the workflow status. So it becomes really simple for them, and that's the whole thing that we are after, is to simplify for the truck drivers. They didn't sign up to do all that paperwork. They're great at driving. They love driving. That's what they're there for, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's That's exciting. So we've just kind of a recap quick is we've identified who is Amit, we've identified the problems in industry, and it doesn't matter the size. And now we're going to talk about more of the solution, which is really exciting. So why don't you walk us through what is EnviroApps, what's easy to track app itself, and yeah, just kind of highlight what's the company, what's the goal, and then we'll kind of dive into it.
Sure. Sounds good. So EnviroApps is the company name. The reason we went with apps was the intent to go bigger than just one app. That's why it's called EnviroApps. And our flagship product right now is called Easy to Track. Now, Easy to Track tells it all in the name. It can track any of your documents, make sure all the regulatory compliance is handled through the workflow. And then what we do is basically use a centralized cloud-based database, and we have access to the on various devices. So right now we just came out with the mobile app on Android. Nice. And so we have that, and it's available on tablets, any kind of tablet, and desktop laptop for sure. So all those access points provide user, and the user profile is what dictates what they see. So we try to keep it simple. So that's the main criteria. We have to keep things simple, and we do that through user profile, so they don't see anything more than what they need to deal with. And then basically you can do all the paperwork in there, and we have functionalities such as cloning. So that makes, so for example, a lot of the times the same goods move from A to B multiple times. Now, why do we have to fill out that same paperwork again and again, right? It takes less than 5 seconds for somebody to do a clone in our system, and they can start another trip, right? And then we have a lot of other automations where the documents would close automatically once the trip is done. And there's so much more we can do. Nice. So this is just the beginning.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think what you're doing, and essentially you're spearheading, like you mentioned, 40 years of the TDG Act. Okay, now let's get paperless. And obviously there's waste. Bill of ladings have been around probably since dinosaurs roamed the earth because people wanted to know what was being moved. But that is a massive solution. So first off, hats off. I'm really excited just to even hear your journey, be part of these conversations, because I really highlight it. I think it's incredible. And so when we're thinking carriers, when we're thinking different companies, who would be the users that would need this type of solution? Would it just be, like I know you mentioned larger carriers, does it work with smaller carriers? Is it industry specific, or is it for any over the road operation, or how does that what's that picture look like?
I'm glad you asked. Our solution is quite sector agnostic. So any company, be it a consignee, consigner, or carrier, any of those parties can use our app, and it's designed for their specific roles. So when they log in, our system knows, yes, this is a consigner, so they'll take it to the consigner part so they can enter that piece. And it is, so think about any kind of dangerous goods being moved. And nobody has a clue how many of these dangerous goods move in a year. We are just estimating, and we are guessing anywhere from 30 million plus documents a year being generated just in Canada, and US is probably 10 times more. So think about the amount of paper that's being generated year after year, and all these regulations require you to keep the paper documents for at least 2 years. So Iron Mountain is getting a lot of that paperwork as well, right?
Yes.
And I mean, think about the number of trees. I just did some quick math, and it's like hundreds of thousands of trees being cut down to satisfy that paper requirement. And if you stack this paper, we're probably doing like six times CN Tower every year in Canada. So it's unnecessary.
Wow.
Yeah, and the part of the reason why it hasn't been done before is because the regulations didn't allow, and Transport Canada is very progressive in their thinking, and so they are the ones that have allowed through this pilot project, and they will issue equivalency certificates to companies that want to try it. So it's not very difficult to go and get those equivalency certificates if you can demonstrate that you're going to meet that equivalent level of safety as paper. And I mean, my personal opinion, uh, we have way more enhanced safety on electronic documents compared to paper. Think about the truck in the ditch. Who's going to go and fetch that piece of paper to look at and find out what it is? Yes, I agree. I mean, if there was just one thing on the truck, right? You can probably place it, figure it out from the placard. But what if there are like 20 things in the truck?
Yes.
Now, it is very difficult to get that information, and that's where electronic shipping documents are way superior, because now uh, the emergency responders call in and they will get an electronic shipping document which has each and every line item. That's what's on the truck and what's the quantity, and even SDSs. So we have also made some more enhancements in the process that companies can attach SDSs with the electronic shipping document. So everything is together instead of keeping the SDS in a binder and looking for that binder. It may get out of date too.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned quite a few really cool things. So is this EnviroApps specific to Canadian, like the Canadian market, or are you in the US market as well?
So great question. Yes, right now we have Canadian clients only, but we have certain Canadian clients that have US operations. So the idea is to work with them for using it in the US. They're already thinking about that because they see so many benefits. And there is a bit of a hurdle in the United States right now. Believe it or not, the agencies allow electronic shipping documents in US for railroad shipments, but not for road. And last year in November, the Trucking Association, American Trucking Association, put a petition to the regulator saying, why aren't you allowing us? We have all the way, like we can do this, we can do electronic, and why aren't we allowing electronic shipping documents? They're called hazardous material shipping paper. Slightly different name, but it is very similar process, and we've already got the solution for it. It's just that we would have to still print it before that, if that regulation doesn't get addressed soon. But it's a matter of time. I can't think of a situation where among COVID and all the other challenges that paper is going to stay here forever. At least there will be an option. The regulators would have to provide an option.
Yeah, I think going paperless from a safety standpoint prior to COVID wasn't really something you'd think about. Aside from maybe a paper cut, you weren't really concerned on the handoffs from that type of a standpoint. But yeah, it was pretty miraculous how so many people adjusted from heavily relying on binders to like, here's a USB stick if you really need it. And I think, yeah, you're right, though. It's only a matter of time before the regs do get changed. And yeah, the states, they're so innovative. They're so advanced that, yeah, I can see that happening in the foreseeable future. So it's nice that you're in a position where you've already identified the need and you already have clients that are both cross-border, that you're like, okay, yeah, we're ready to turn it on, or we can be ready when that time comes. So that's exciting. My other question. Sorry, go ahead.
For once, Canada is ahead. So I'm really proud about that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and they did pretty good in the Olympics this year too, so that's nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So from a user experience, and we can keep this high level because I know we don't have like hours to really dissect, and I just get excited and I ramble. But from a user experience, so far everything sounds really easy because they're already operating with dangerous goods. So it's just changing a process in the workflow. So if I'm a carrier, and I'm more so speaking of the smaller carriers because sometimes they feel like they're drowning because there's so many things coming at them at once. So would it, can you, well, yeah, I don't want to oversimplify, but can you walk us through, if you're a smaller carrier listening to this and considering, hey, like, yeah, I'm sick and tired of all this paperwork. I didn't realize I didn't even, like, all of those things. Can you walk us through at a high level, just what it looks like, again, what you're allowed to, what it looks like in regards to signing up and, or just the added benefit out the gate, if that's cool?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so really, big or small carriers have to satisfy the same regulations, right? And then a lot of them use a bill of lading for just the handoff and invoicing purposes, but then they have to also meet the TDG requirements, or if they're moving waste, then they have to meet the provincial waste manifesting requirements. So, and we have had this recently, inquiries are coming in where smaller carriers are like, well, I want to go electronic, but then I have these 2 or 3 different papers. I'm like, you know what, we can do it all in one, because TDG, at least, that's a great advantage with TDG, not on waste manifesting because it's a very rigid form. This is exactly how it has to be. TDG allows you great amount of flexibility. They tell you these are my mandatory fields that need to be, this information needs to be there in a TDG shipping document. But beyond that, they don't restrict you in a particular format. So that's what we've been doing is their bill of lading and TDG document can be combined into one. And that simplifies their process greatly. And then, so what we have to do once you figure out, okay, this is your process, what we specialize in, and this is our differentiator from any other company, is we customize that solution. So we customize that solution to the business's needs rather than giving a rigid form for them to fit their business processes in. And that's where it is very important. It's a big differentiator because now they are not changing their process. They're just changing the tool to run their process and making it simpler. And once you figure out, okay, this is my form, then we build that, and then we have default. So if it, and most likely it would meet our default package. But if they want something different, let's say they wanted to add a JSA in there too, so we can do that.
Nice.
And then you can basically, we take it to Transport Canada for approval under the the Regulatory Sandbox project. And it is now quite streamlined. Like, they have seen our system multiple times. They're quite comfortable with it. And so within a matter of 2 to 3, maximum 4 weeks, they can get their approval, and then they can start going digital, right? And yeah, so it's not a long time frame. And this is another differentiator with a startup company like ours, is we are very responsive to our customers' needs, and we provide them a solution that fits, and not like too big, not too small, right size. There's no, that's the benefit. So there's less learning from the carrier or the driver's point of view, because they're using the same form, they're just going into digital. And digital will help, because think of the classification. So they either they either have to keep notes on that classification, or they can just click on the drop down and it fills automatically. So it makes it easy, and it will not be incorrect. That's the beauty of it.
And you highlighted some incredible, those are a lot of wins, because I'm just remembering my time hauling fuel and carrying multiple books and never looking at the books because thankfully I didn't have an emergency, but I'm like, yeah, that'd be nice. There's no more books. And yeah, I like the fact that it's easy. And you mentioned that you make it work for the business. It's not the business trying to, yeah, readjust, because change management is so hard as it is, where, yeah, if you're, here is a very easy to implement system and it's going to save you tons of time and money. It's a huge win. And I don't want to ask the actual dollar value, but we talked about the 8 minutes for waiting for a printer, and my joke about it's actually 25 minutes because of the bathroom break, the water
Yeah.
cooler. And that's just, again, speaking from experience. And I wasn't even, well, I don't think many people go to work planning to be lazy. I'm just social. And, oh, hey, so-and-so night, like that just happens. So from a costing perspective, knowing how much you're helping carriers save, again, you don't have to tell actual price, but how did you do the pricing model so that way you can show that, hey, look, this is a normal cost in time. This is the cost of the product. Is it pretty reasonable, affordable, or how did you determine that?
Yeah, absolutely. It is quite reasonable, and it goes on a sliding scale. So as the scale increases, obviously the cost per document decreases. But just to give you a bit of information on what all costs companies are incurring, and a lot of the times they're not even aware of it. So we just talked about the printing and the people waiting. Now think about when that paper gets completed, and then it has to be attached to invoices to the client, right? So then somebody has to take a photocopy, put it in the courier, that goes from one place to another. And then they have to keep another copy, send it to, put it into file, and then send it to storage. And then once the 2 years are up, then they'll take it and then recycle it. So all this kind of adds up. You don't have to do any of this in an electronic system. Our system automatically, once the workflow is done, moves it into a different archive place, and everything is there. Nothing is lost. They just go into there and they can search that document, and they can print, or if they have to, or attach it, and done. They have it for forever, and it cuts down on the cost. So, like, just guessing, actually one of our clients timed all this, and they were surprised at the number. And now multiply that by tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands, it is a significant number, and we come at a fraction of it. And depending on the scale, we may be even like just the hard copy cost equivalent, and you get all the time savings for free.
Amazing. Yeah, and just some of my close friends are auditors, and they don't audit necessarily TDG, but part of like a compliance audit is supporting documents. So they may be looking at bill of ladings, and instead of someone trying to search through, oh, here it is, it's a couple clicks of a button. So I think that, yeah, it's a powerful solution. I feel more like I get so excited that I slide down in my chair when when I strongly believe in stuff, and I'm like, yes, this is definitely the direction. And yeah, I'm just really happy for you, and I'm happy for your clients, because I think, yeah, it is industry leading. So it's very innovative, and it'll be nice when our industry is, well, of course I have that, instead of looking at it as like, are you sure? But yeah, anyone listening, it's a huge, like, big shout out, because I just get so passionate when I see all of the challenges being fixed. And that's, again, when we're problem solvers and as entrepreneurs, that's the goal, is to solve people's problems. I mean, you guys are doing just really, really good stuff. So I'm really pumped. This is good. So how has, from your current client base, you've shared some stuff, but when they're using Easy to Track and they're working with EnviroApps, how has the response been so far?
Yeah, they're quite happy. I mean, some of the things that they never thought, like, first of all, some of the clients didn't even know the problem existed, and when we, like, we've come up with a very basic tool where they put in their time it takes to do this and that, and the cost, and then the number of documents, and we can figure out how much they're spending currently. When they look at the number, their eyes go really wide. Oh, we need to do something about this, right? And then the communication aspect is huge. So one other thing, like, which is totally, I never thought of that, is in the one of the clients that's using it. So they mentioned in the debriefing we have had on benefits, and they said, it's preventing the the potential for spills. And I was kind of intrigued. I said, how? And they explained to me, okay, so when a truck is loading or unloading, the driver is tempted, because he's just waiting around, right? He's tempted to go in and do his paperwork. And when the paperwork is already there, there's no excuse for him to go back into the cab. And he's actually watching the loading and unloading. And if anything goes wrong, he's right there to catch those spills or eliminate those spills. So that was huge. Like, we're enhancing safety, we're preventing spills. Never thought of that.
Incredible. Yeah, no, that's another big win. And I'm sure well, I'll ask the question. Do you have almost a Q&A or frequently asked questions of areas that EnviroApps help save money or improve operations? Do you have something like that?
Yeah, we have, like, on our website some information, but we are developing a FAQ to be posted on our website soon. There's tons of opportunity here. And think about this, right? Why have we not done this in so many years? Like, today, you can watch your burger come from the restaurant and get notified every single movement, right? And why aren't we watching the movement of dangerous goods that closely? I think that's way more important than our burger falling in our lap.
Totally agree. Yeah, totally. That's a really good point. And I think, I don't know what it is with transportation, but at times we are archaic and at times we get comfortable. One of my least favorite quotes of all time is, "We've always done it this way." And it's like, no, let's give ourselves a clear whiteboard and let's start dreaming up what is possible, what can improve. And obviously EnviroApps is part of that solution. So it's exciting.
Yeah, the other thing is, our drivers do a great job, and that's why we don't see that many incidents, right? So it doesn't get the attention, and, oh, everything is working fine, so why fix if nothing is broken? But really, it's not about that. It's about making efficiency improvements and making lives easier for our truck drivers. Because, like, I'm hearing, and I don't have a lot of contacts in the industry, but just a few, and I'm hearing there's a big issue around finding the carriers, right? People wanting to go into the industry and part of it could be the amount of paperwork that they have to deal with.
Yeah, I'm very vocal to support professional drivers. So drivers that are listening, shout out to you. And yeah, paperwork is very burdensome. And you mentioned electronic logs in Canada, so I'm very pro ELDs. And part of it is, like, monitoring hours of service is super important. But one of the number one ways a driver can get a ticket on the roadside, so if they go through an inspection with law enforcement, is inaccurate paperwork. And anytime that it's an electronic solution, two things happen. One, driver's peace of mind increases because it's not, I did my best, I thought I wrote it down properly. You eliminate the form and manner concern. And part of it too is, from a law enforcement's perspective, is the fact that they can see everything really clear. So their interaction with the driver is a lot more smooth because they're not guessing. What does that say? Is that actually a 5 or a 3? Like, all of that guess is gone. So
exactly.
Your experience is just that much better. So, but
that's huge, but that's basic, right? Legibility of that paper document.
Yes.
I got that from one of the Transport Canada inspectors too. He says, well, this is one of the 2 legible documents I've ever seen.
Yeah. And again, sometimes when you're busy, it's an oversight.
Yeah.
It's an oversight till you need it, and then it matters. And is that a 3 or is that a 5? It makes a difference. So, but yeah, I think again that's very simplistic. But yeah, you've definitely checked off a lot of really good boxes. So I'm proud to support EnviroApps and what you guys are doing. I think it's awesome. So for different people out in the world thinking about creating apps, workflow systems, all that type of stuff, do you want to share any advice? Obviously, you're living in this space. You got your first client, which you said is very difficult, which I completely agree with. But what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs looking to start apps and workflow systems just to help? Maybe not trucking, but just in general, just to help.
Yeah, what I would say is you have to find a client that's willing to work with you, because building a solution is easy. It has to be a fit. It has to solve a problem, right? If you don't do that, then your efforts are, there's no point. And then you have to think about your user all the time. Like whenever you're designing a screen or user interface, how think put yourself in the user's shoes and then do it. And I know that because I did software implementations in my previous work, and that's where I got this bug with the software side. And I feel it is quite exciting to develop, but then you have to be very mindful of getting the right input from your users, and that's key to your success. And so the other thing I would say is entrepreneurship is not for everybody. If it was easy, everybody would do it. There are joys. You feel accomplishment and all that. But I would mention another thing I would mention is the 3 Ps. So follow your passion and have lots of patience and perseverance. Then only you will succeed. It requires a lot of effort. And when you get to that point, it feels really good, for sure.
That's incredible. Yeah, I like the 3 Ps. That's good advice. I make a lot of notes as I talk, so that way I can refer back. And I'm like, yeah. So no, I appreciate that. And yeah, those listening too that are just, I think they're going to be encouraged by our conversation, because I think you've done a really good job as a company and as a person, just highlighting the benefits and the value adds that you're doing. It's not just like, I haven't heard you once say, I'm going to get rich and I'm money. Like obviously making money is part of business, but it's nice to see your passion to solve problems and to help people. And I think, yeah, again, those listening, and that's what I'm all about too, is just really having that impact. So it's nice. So as you just kind of continue to navigate, if it's in transportation with EnviroApps, but just your day-to-day life, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to be most remembered for?
Yeah, no, I want to be remembered for, making life simpler for the truck drivers, eliminating all that paperwork and, reducing that environmental footprint, not killing those trees. But the other part of me is about energy efficiency, and I'm all for responsible development. So development is good, but we have to do it responsibly, and it doesn't take a whole lot of extra effort. Of course, you have to go the extra mile to do it, but it's not a whole lot from deviation from your normal course, but it can make a huge impact. And that's where I mentioned at the beginning, the house that we built is now, if you consider everything like the electricity we generate through our solar panels and all that, and the energy efficiency things that we did, we're like sitting at 75%, 25% of a typical Alberta home. So we have reduced our environmental footprint by 75%. And if everybody did that, I think a lot of the big problems will get solved.
Totally. Yeah, no, I remember still when you're walking us through. So Eric, our other co-host, and we were walking through that whole journey, and I'm like I was speechless for most of it. And I'm like, I wish we connected prior, because I would have asked those questions, because we just went through it we moved in last summer. So we've been here almost a year. And even just what you were talking about, I'm like, I wouldn't have thought to ask any of those questions, because that's not my
and it's
space.
experience.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
experience too, right? And that's what I kind of sometimes think about. I should be able to help a lot of homeowners. I haven't figured out how, but I mean, if somebody wants to ask me something about energy efficiency in a home and I have data to share, I'm happy to do that. And that's the whole point, like sharing your knowledge, because the biggest thing is fear of the unknown. So
Mhm.
when you try something new, you're always afraid of, oh, what if I fail. But when you've seen somebody do that, and then that person can share the data, that whole thing goes away. Then
Yes.
you're on the right track, you're not going to lose, and you're only going to gain from that experience.
Totally. Yeah. And again, you're doing that in EnviroApps too, where
Yeah,
you saw an opportunity after 40 years of an existing act. So
yeah.
I think you're really living that space. And yeah, I'm honored that you're able to share all this information today. So how do people just learn more about EnviroApps and just the impact that you're having in the transportation sector?
Sure. So we have a LinkedIn page and a Twitter page, as well as the website. The website is www.enviroapps.ca. And if you have a question, please reach out to me anytime, and you can do that by emailing info@enviroapps.ca. So be mindful.ca. We're a Canadian company.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I'll ensure to include all of the contact details in the show notes. So website and social media addresses and stuff too. So just as we kind of come to a close, Amit, was there any final thoughts that you'd like to share today?
Yeah, what I would say is, don't be afraid of new technology. Try it, and there are lots of solutions out there. We are not the only one. There's tons of other solutions that can solve simple problems. And like you, the other thing is you have to build a solution in steps rather than going into something huge. Just try a small part, do some pilots, then build upon that success. Because what a lot of the times companies get into is they take on a big project and they have lots of stakeholders, and they go on this journey for software implementation and all that, and then the users are not seeing any benefits for a while, so they get frustrated. You have to do it in small bits, and then build upon success, show them this is what is achieved, and then the momentum builds up. And something like this, like what we are doing with EnviroApps, is not very time consuming to implement. Like we can implement in days, not months or years. And that's a very low hanging fruit, right? And there are others out there similar to us. So build upon those kind of successes, because digitalization is going to be the key to survival with what we are dealing with now, given commodity pricing, given all the competition, all the COVID issues, and yeah. So if we have to be successful as an industry, we have to be able to compete at a world scale. And that's my final thought. We have lots of solutions. We just need people willing to be able to try it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And you definitely have my support, Emmett. I think what you've built and your team has built, just you have a really good focus. I think your goals definitely align with how I feel about problem solving, and probably even more, obviously, in a lot of different ways. But yeah, you've shared some incredible information today. And yeah, I'm really proud to get behind EnviroApps, and just yeah, any opportunity to share the word, and knowing that the solution again is much greater than oneself. I really respect that. So thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, all the best.
Thank you, you too. Okay, have a great day. Well, Amit, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Honestly, it was really inspiring just hearing your why, hearing kind of how you got started, and the solutions that yourself, your co-founder, and EnviroApps offer. I'm a really big advocate when it comes to just removing hurdles for carriers and drivers, and EnviroApps definitely does a great job at doing that. So everyone that's listening, I definitely encourage you to connect with Amit and EnviroApps again by visiting www.enviroapps.ca, as well as you can check them out on all major social media platforms. And I have included all of the contact details in the show notes below. So everyone that continues to support and listen to the Truck Focus podcast, I just wanted to say thank you. Honestly, just the kind words and the growth of the podcast and the platform has been super encouraging, and we just really appreciate it. And we know it's because of our dedicated listeners that it's even possible. So again, Amit, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. It means the world, and I hope you have a really good day. To learn more about the podcast, you can simply visit our website at www.pvtlcompliance.com and just check out Truck Focus Podcasts on there. We have recently launched our newsletter, so I've also included a link below to make sure that you can sign up, where we're all about connecting industry leaders to industry. So there's people just like Amit and EnviroApps that are creating a change that is necessary for advancement, innovation, and just a lot of really good things. So again, it's all the information is in the show notes below. So thank you again. Have a really wonderful day. Bye.